Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for taking out time and becoming part of this session. So, I am Tahir Kamran. I teach history at Beacon House National University. And we are lucky to have in our midst Professor Yunas Samad. Professor Yunas Samad is an eminent academic, British academic, who part-time comes to LUMS for teaching, for educating the people at LUMS who deserve a bit better education, of course. He has that book which I rate very high. You know, this is the real name of the book is Nation in Turmoil, but it has been rendered into to Urdu by Nadeem Akhtar from Karachi. The Urdu title of the book is Pakistani Qoumiyat or Riyasat ka Nazriati Bohran, 1937 to 1958. So when I read that book, you know, I was really amazed because that opened new vistas of perception and new ways of understanding of history of that very, very crucial phase that Pakistan went through structurally, as well as so far events were concerned in both ways. So that's the book, and our discussants are Raja. Raja is teaching at GCU. She is at Department of Global History and Archive Studies. And then we have Adnan Tariq. Adnan Tariq just published a book on Lahore and partition, you know, the implication of partition on Lahore, and particularly violence with special reference to the archival stuff. You know, he put all this narrative together with a lot of diligence, a lot of hard work. So first of all, I will request Professor Yunas Samad to give a bit of an overview of the book, with particular reference to the temporal span of this book, you know, from 1937 to 1958. You know, what intrigues me really is that why is it that he chose that time period? Does he not think that there was a cutoff point in 1947? So he just made us think as if there was no structural hiatus or there was no structural cutoff point, you know, because we know that India and Pakistan came apart in 1947. That was a big structural change, but he probably believes in structural continuity than structural departure, so far as that history is concerned. So, with particular reference, I want you to shed light on.
Thank you. So, I suppose when I was
Can you hear?
Yes.
researching this, so you know, people write about Pakistan movement, Pakistan history, and they stop at 47. Then they talk about Pakistan politics, and it starts in 47 onwards. And as Tahir is saying that, you know, that there is a structural break. But the question that came to my mind was that, you know, when we talk about Pakistan movement, we say that, you know, the people who supported the Muslim League and Muslim nationalism were all these heroes. But by the time we looked at the same people in the 1950s, we start saying these are self-serving politicians who are what you call incapable of what you call delivering on what they promised. And so, you know, we have this paradox that in one period you say they're heroes, and then the next period you say they're zeros. And so what I was trying to look at is to say, yes, okay, I mean, partition is a major discontinuity, but there are strong elements of continuity that we also need to consider. And so my focus was initially to look at, what was the underlying or the kind of political determination that brought these disparate groups of people together under this banner of Muslim nationalism. And then what you call try to explain why they started to what you call fracturize in such a way. And so one of the themes that I try to illustrate is that when we talk about the emergence of Muslim nationalism, that the commonality was an issue around the issue of autonomy. It was a common theme among Muslims, whether they were Punjab or whether they were Bengal. It is that departure from that theme from 47 onwards that creates the kinds of tensions that we now see even today. I also wanted to remind people that in Pakistan history, can't talk about Pakistan history without talking about Bengal. Without Bengal, there could never be Pakistan. There are more Bengalis than there were Punjabis. Without them, there could never be a movement. And the way we treated them is also an issue which still has relevance today. And so one of the things that I try to illustrate is, okay, we have an idea, what we think is about Pakistan nationalism, but we also think about how does a state, and again, going back to the issue of continuity, this state actually has very strong colonial continuity where colonial strategies still persist, strategies of cohesion and collaboration. And so some of these themes you can talk about demand for autonomy, the way the state treats what you call political dissent using cohesion and collaboration are themes that we still see today. Yes, modified. Must say they are modified, but there are very strong elements of continuity which continue. So this was something which I really wanted to explore, and I tried to do this, what you call, by looking at this critical period from 37 to 1958. It's a small window. It's a small window because prior to 37, there wasn't any Muslim political national identity. And by 47, we start to see a new state, and then we see this process of what you call contestation and what you call conflict which takes place. And we can elaborate on that.
So, Raja, now, Raja, I will just invite a question, just bringing your take on that. Keeping in view what Yunas says in his book, and just trying to connect whatever happened in late 40s and 1950s, and whatever is happening now in Pakistan, do you think that Pakistan virtually was a state insufficiently imagined?
Thank you, sir, for the question. First of all, just building up on what Dr. Yunas Samad said as well, and I'll reiterate what Fanon has said, not that we should link partition necessarily to a revolutionary overthrow, but it's always that he also reiterates this, that the revolution is the easy concept, what happens afterwards is more troubled and problematic. So definitely the turmoil years that you are talking about how the idea was imagined, but executing it or sort of navigating that vacuum where you have this sense of anarchy, where there's no sense of order, and how sort of people reconcile the new reality they were living with. So for me personally as well, the time period was quite important because yes, it's about the lead up to the struggle and how the goals were achieved, but it's about how the vacuum was dealt with, how they started emerging as a new independent state as well. Now, coming to what you said about whether it was sufficiently imagined, we can go back. Insufficiently imagined, yes, the question surrounding that. We go back to Benedict Anderson's imagined communities as well. And for me personally, just assuming that you can group all Muslims together into this one monolithic, homogeneous identity without taking into account certain very crucial differences, or just a very oversimplified manner in which you can just group them into one stable a category, assuming that it would not evolve. So for me, it was quite insufficiently imagined, and Professor Samad also points this out in his book, where he says that a monolithic Muslim political identity wouldn't necessarily be the solution. And we see this happening after partition as well, where yes, everyone had some sort of unity leading up to the establishment of Pakistan, but you see that unity sort of crumbling into a fragile state where you have regional and communal movements taking over instead of national ones. So yes, I would agree with your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Raja. That's very short and sweet. Now coming to Adnan Tariq. Adnan, you have reviewed that book, Pakistani Qoumiyat, or Riyasat ka Nazriati Bohran. So, do you think that there was a Nazriati Bohran in it? What sort of a Nazriati Bohran have you found out in that book? Because we talked a lot about ideology, but was there any ideology in late 40s and early 50s? Some people say that, it was during the Ayub days that the whole question of ideology was brought up. And then many people are of the opinion that it was after 1971 that ideology of Pakistan became so important. Prior to that, the question of ideology was either irrelevant or it was obviously not taken into account. So, आप क्या कहते हैं इसके बारे में?
सर बहुत शुक्रिया, मैं उर्दू में बात करूंगा। सर इस तरह से है कि यूनुस समद साहब की किताब बड़ी इंपॉर्टेंट है। इस किताब में जो नज़रियाती बहरान का जो नोमेनक्लेचर इसके टाइटल फ्रेज में मौजूद है, मेरे ख्याल में ये बुनियादी तौर पे पाकिस्तानी नेशनलिज्म के साथ साथ उसका जो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल डिस्पेंसेशन है, ये उसको डील करता है कि 47 के बाद पाकिस्तान की जो स्टेट है वो एक कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन को नहीं बना पा रही है। ये कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन क्यों नहीं बना पाती? आप देखिए कि जब 23 मार्च 1940 को करारदाद लाहौर बनती है, उससे लेकर 3 जून 1947 तक मुस्लिम लीग अपनी तमाम हाई अप्स पूरी लीडरशिप के साथ पब्लिक स्फेयर के अंदर पाकिस्तान के क़याम की बात करती है। लेकिन जब वो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल टेबल पे जाती है, ब्रिटिश गवर्नमेंट के साथ टेबल के ऊपर टेबल टॉक करती है, जिसमें तमाम स्टेक होल्डर्स मौजूद हैं, कांग्रेस मौजूद है, तो वहाँ पर कभी भी इन्होंने पाकिस्तान की डिमांड नहीं की है। वहाँ पर ये कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल स्टेलमेट को ब्रेक करने के लिए मुख्तलिफ अपनी डिमांड्स करते हैं, लेकिन अलग सेपरेट होमलैंड की बात नहीं करते। तो आप देखिए कि 3 जून का मंसूबा भी इसी कॉन्टेक्स्ट के अंदर पास होता हुआ नज़र आता है हमको, जिसमें हम देखते हैं कि पाकिस्तान का मंसूबा इस तरह से पास किया गया है जो मुस्लिम लीग ने डिमांड नहीं की थी। तो ये हम 1940 से लेकर 47 तक की तमाम पॉलिटिकल डेवलपमेंट को अगर सामने रखें प्राइमरी सोर्सेज की मदद से, जैसा कि इस किताब में भी बड़े ज़बरदस्त तरीके से आर्काइवल मटेरियल को यूज़ किया गया, तो हमको पता चलता है कि पाकिस्तान के बारे में जो ये कहा जाता है कि वो इनसफिशेंटली इमेजिन्ड है, इसको अगर एक नेगेटिव पॉइंट के बजाय एक पॉजिटिव स्टेटमेंट के तौर पे लिया जाए कि ये इनसफिशेंटली इमेजिन्ड था, जिसकी वजह से ये नज़रियाती बहरान पैदा होता है। 47 से पहले हमको मुस्लिम लीग की कोई प्रिपरेशन, जैसे आप देखिए इंडियन नेशनल कांग्रेस ने 45 में आज़ाद इंडिया का कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन बना लिया था टेंटेटिव, लेकिन मुस्लिम लीग की जानिब से हमको ऐसी कोई डेवलपमेंट नज़र नहीं आती। तो ये वो चीज़ है, जब 3 जून के मंसूबे में जब हम देखते हैं कि जिसको मंजूर जैसे करवाया जाता है, तो हमें मुस्लिम लीग प्रिपेयर नज़र नहीं आती। उसकी यही अनप्रिपेयर्डनेस जो है वो हमको 47 के बाद रियासत के नज़रियाती बहरान के अंदर ट्रांसलेट होती हुई नज़र आती है।
Very good.
Can I say something? When you talk about imagine, I think what I want to express is that you need to contextualize 1940 resolution within a political strategy in relationship to the colonial power and conquest. And the political strategy is to have maximum kind of unity, even without having, in the most broader sense, without, and the problem with that was that if they went into detail that Pakistan meant this, or we want this particular demand, then immediately division would occur. And so there is a deliberate ambiguity in the political strategy so that they can present a unified faith. So, I mean, you look at the Lahore Resolution. I mean, the Lahore Resolution talks, it says two Pakistan, two states. It doesn't say one state, it says two states. Why? Because East Bengal wasn't going to become part of one state. When you look at what the phrase says within, you know, the Lahore Resolution that the individual units in the Western state will be independent, why was that even inserted? That is because it reflected the discontent or the concerns of Sindh being dominated by Punjab, the same with frontier being dominated. So the states had these concerns. When what you call the Lahore Resolution passed, Muslim League formed a foreign commission to examine all the different propositions for Muslim statehood. That is not only what you call Rahmat Ali schemes, but it looked at the peace schemes which came from mainly by princely India. They looked at Skandar schemes, etc. And one of the questions that they couldn't decide, and they kept repeating asking Jinnah, was, is it going to be a separate state or is it going to be a part of the Indian Union? And when he didn't reply, they finally issued a report and said we were going to be a separate state, and Jinnah immediately refuted it. And that is tactical, because he knew that if he talked about partition, if you're talking about separation, it means partition for Punjab, it means partition from Bengal, and no politician in Bengal or Punjab, Muslim politician, would support partition. All the efforts of Skandar, what you call Skandar Hayat in Punjab, was about avoiding partition. All the schemes they came out. There was no desire within Bengal to talk about partition. In fact, when the mobilizations took place for the 46 election, the slogan in East Bengal was Greater United Bengal. So, I mean, this is the kind of divisions that were within the Muslim polity at the time. And of course, when you talk about negotiations at the center, I mean, he did accept the cabinet mission plan. And the cabinet mission plan excluded the notion of a sovereign Pakistan. Then when Sohrawardy and Chandra Bose said that we want an independent, united Bengal, Jinnah supported that. It was shot down by Congress. They said, no way we are going to promote that, because the understanding was clear. If you allow one province to become independent, then all the provinces of India will say, we want the same, and the princely states will want the same. And so you can see that now, as a political strategy, it was effective, that it was able to actually achieve a certain result. The problem is that when you come to Pakistan, you say, forget all that. That's where the problem becomes, that everything you said to the states, that you said that we are going to give you autonomy, we're going to protect your autonomy, and now you reverse it and say, no, the situation is different and we are going to put you into a centralized state, then that's where the issues become problematic.
Yunas, you brought this up at the right moment, I think, because that's from here that playbook of the current scenario gets unfolded. This particularly during 1950s, this coercive sort of centralization that took place. That sort of a method to madness, it exists and it continued and it continues to this day. So how do you juxtapose all the events that took place in 1950s with the current scenario?
That's a difficult question. I mean, so let me just say, as I said, one of the elements of continuity is, besides political thought, in terms of political thought, is the state structure. And so fundamentally, we have the colonial structure, which is the steel frame. And the steel frame is fundamentally a cohesive instrument to design for colonial subjects, not for citizens. That is the instrument of control. All right. Now the problem is that you have a state which doesn't feel it has enough direct coercive power to intervene directly in the political process, and so it operates behind the scenes to create situations of instability that allows it to justify more direct control. And so, I mean, elections. Well, I mean, elections were due. We had elections in 51 in Punjab, then 53 in Sindh, then we had 54 in Bengal, and each one of them, the state clearly cleared the opposition from the landscape using cohesive methodology of excluding them from the political process, and then being selective and saying, well, if you want to come to power, you must collaborate on my terms. And that becomes a kind of basic strategy that it has echoes today. Today we would just say it's a selection process. And so we begin to see how they create the conditions that justify for them to behave in a particular way. And they justify that, and this is where they try to impose their ideology that, that Pakistan should be nominally Islamic, it should be a centralized state. At the heart of the issue was this, that you had people, Punjab's main concern of being going along with what you call Muslim nationalism, well, they didn't want it to be roped into a center with Congress. That comes into Pakistan, the main concern flips and say, well, yeah, okay, we don't have control of the center here because Bengal is going to become the dominant group. How are we going to stop them? That becomes the issue at this point. And so Punjab's position changes. It changes. It doesn't change overnight because there are lots of people who are saying, no, we don't accept that. But that change becomes quite important here. Because in that sense, what Punjab said before 47, what said afterwards becomes different.
Raja, now one thing that I just want you to reflect on is, what Yunas was just saying, that it was a continuity of colonial structures. So I was just leafing through a very provocative book of His Excellency Ali Usman Kasmi, and that's Mulk, Qaum and Sultanat. In that he also uses the term post-colonial state. Pakistan is a post-colonial state. So I have seen that Pakistan was a post-colonial state at one point of time, but it transitioned into a neo-colonial state structure. Now, at the contemporary hour, Pakistan can be designated as a neo-colonial state structure. And why is it so? And then he also, Yunas also referred to a steel frame of bureaucracy, civil service. So don't you think now the coercive control is being exercised not by a steel frame of bureaucracy, but directly the army? And as they're not, they're not using this ruse that, well, we are state managing things. They're managing from the front. So what's your take on that? You being a political theorist, I hope we will be enlightened from your imaginative thoughts.
First of all, honored for the title of a political theorist. Don't think I'm quite there yet. But regarding the post-colonial versus neo-colonial, and particularly the transition to that, definitely important to note, I guess, the temporality of it. Of course, post-colonial would refer more to the immediate aftermath when the colonizers present is not physically present over there, but you can still see the effects and those institutions still continue. But with neocolonialism, you see that the so-called local structures have subsumed what was there before. And even though the colonizers themselves aren't there, but their structural legacies are still continuing. And we do see this immediately after partition as well. During the colonial rule, you had certain, I guess, tribal leaders or princely states, they would collaborate with the colonizers and carry out their favors. But of course, we see this being usurped or simply taken over by the local elite, be it the Muhajirs or the Jagirdars or whoever was in power at that point, who are just sort of replicating it. So you do see this happening even right now, where power is still concentrated at one front, be it the core rather than the periphery, be it with the select 5% during the Ayub's rule to even right now. So the power concentration hasn't really changed throughout history. It has evolved and it has adapted to new circumstances. Regarding the second question, there has been a shift in terms of who to blame or who you can pinpoint, because initially we have this notion of Foucault especially, that power is most effective when it's masked. But that mask is slowly coming off right now, because initially no one dared point out who it was, or you couldn't really pinpoint it. Now you do have people being more open to this interpretation or bringing it to daily conversations. So the concentration of power is still there, it's just who's willing to point it out more or has that mask unveiled off as well. Definitely yes, post-colonial versus neo-colonial, I guess the structures are still there, it's just when the so-called indigenous section takes over it and starts replicating the same logic. So we definitely see that happening there, be it the political or economic, or we might even extend it to the cultural hegemonic sphere as well. Thank you.
Dan, when we see this book and its emphasis on right when it's being discussed that such things like objective resolution, the way it was passed, and then certain political trajectory got unfolded, and then obviously immediately after that, Yunas also mentioned the way East Pakistanis were being treated. So that ethnic fissure, along with the religious, religious connotation. So how do you see this problem coming along? Not only you're complicating things in ethnical terms, but also religious and sectarian terms. And we must not forget that Tehreek-e-Nifaz, Majlis-e-Tahfuz-e-Khatm-e Nabuwat also was formed in 1949. So how do you see 1949 as a very important year in the history of Pakistan?
जी सर, ये बड़ा इम्पोर्टेंट क्वेश्चन है और इस डॉक्टर अहमद यूनुस समद साहब ने अपनी किताब में इस क्वेश्चन को बहुत अच्छे तरीके से डील किया है। इस तरह से है कि आप देखें कि ऑब्जेक्टिव रेजोल्यूशन जो है, शायद उसकी पाकिस्तान की एक नई स्टेट को ज़रूरत नहीं थी, लेकिन पाकिस्तान की नई स्टेट ने, सिविल मिलिट्री ब्यूरोक्रेसी ने ऑब्जेक्टिव रेजोल्यूशन को एक पर्पसफुल डॉक्यूमेंट के तौर पे बनाया। और आप देखिए कि ये जो पंजाब है वो उसको इस बात की समझ आ चुकी है कि बंगाल जो है वो डोमिनेट कर जाएगा। अगर कोई भी सोशल कॉन्ट्रैक्ट बनता है, कोई भी कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल डिस्पेंसेशन बन जाती है, कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन अभी बनना है, अभी बनने के प्रोसेस में है। तो कोई भी कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन डिस्पेंसेशन बनेगी तो पंजाब जो है वो बंगाल के डोमिनेंस को रोक नहीं पाएगा। तो आप देखिए कि उस बंगाल की डोमिनेंस को रोकने के लिए पाकिस्तान की स्टेट ने रिलीजियस कार्ड को यूज़ किया है, चाहे वो ऑब्जेक्टिव रेजोल्यूशन की शक्ल में हो, चाहे वो एंटी अहमदिया मूवमेंट के बाद आप देखते हैं कि ख्वाजा नाज़मुद्दीन की गवर्नमेंट को जिस तरह से हटाया गया है और उनको हेल्म ऑफ द अफेयर से जिस तरह से दूर किया गया है, तो उसमें आपको पाकिस्तान के अंदर वेस्ट पाकिस्तान में पंजाबी पॉलिटिशियंस की जानिब से जिसमें फ्यूडल सेटअप भी आपको नज़र आता है और सिविल मिलिट्री ब्यूरोक्रेसी की विंग्स भी नज़र आती हैं बहुत क्लियरली। तो वो आप देखिए कि वो एंटी अहमदी जो राइट्स हो रहे हैं उनको जिस तरह से पोलिटिसाइज करते हैं, तो उसका बुनियादी पर्पस तो यही नज़र आता है कि वो बंगाल की डोमिनेंस से अवॉइड करना चाह रहे हैं।
Yunus, one thing that is being described to us, and when I was doing my degree in history, I was also taught that one of the real problems that Pakistan faced was the early demise of Qaid-e-Azam. But later on we came to know that when things went from bad to worse, particularly in Punjab, before that election, obviously Qaid-e-Azam was alive at that time. So Mumtaz Doltana and Mamdood, they went to Jinnah, and Jinnah tried to mediate and tried to reconcile the two warring groups. But he gave up. He said that he cannot do that. He cannot resolve that. And same was the case in Sindh. So there was no political solution available to Muslim leadership, including Jinnah, when Pakistan was a nascent state. Am I right in concluding this?
Yeah, okay. I mean, there were some tough political questions. I mean, I suspect that there were, on one hand, everybody talks about building a new state. But there was also building a new political party. And they were building a new political party by expelling troublesome Muslim leaguers who were challenging the leadership. So there was that dimension was taking place. I mean, Shahid Sohrawardy, he was Chief Minister of Bengal, but he was elected from Calcutta. They expelled him from the party. They didn't give him even a seat in the East Pakistan legislature. They gave Liaquat Ali Khan, who was elected from UP, they gave him a seat from the East Pakistan legislature so he could become Prime Minister. So what we're beginning to see is that the party is playing favorites in the sense that loyalists who are loyal to Jinnah or loyal to the leadership are being encouraged, and the people who are challenging the leadership are being expelled. And you can see this going back even before partition. I mean, GM Said is responsible for the Lahore, for the Pakistan resolution in Sindh Assembly. He is responsible for bringing Muslim League into power there, but he left the party. Shahid Sohrawardy was responsible for making, with Abul Hashim, making what you call Muslim League a mass party in Bengal. He was expelled, along with Abul Hashim and others who created that party. And in Punjab, the split was Mamdood property was all from East Punjab, and now he found himself in West Punjab with no political base, and was using all his what you call access to power to make monetary compensation so that he can what you call have some kind of power hold in that particular thing. And the struggle between Doltana and Mamdood was political. Doltana said, this man has no power base here. Why is he chief minister? Let's get rid of him. And so what we begin to see is that the party is being reformulated, and those close to the what you call the leadership are expelling those who are considered to disloyal. I mean, so were the, and Jinnah's relationship was very difficult, if I put it in the politest terms. So you saw this trajectory which was taking place. And I think the thing was that, but I want to say one other thing though. Because we all always say, look, they are fighting among themselves, but there is another fight behind the scene. And that is between the bureaucracy, people like Ghulam Muhammad and people who became Governor General, and how they are also undermining the loyalists, because the loyalists will come to a political solution, and a political solution is not what they wanted.
Now, Yunas, again, that's a bit of a ticklish question about when I was just researching on the topic that I was writing, particularly with respect to the connection of army with political leadership. Right from the very beginning, one thing that Abul Kalam Azad said that when this lead up to partition, whenever Indian National Congress leadership visited soldiers, army soldiers, those army soldiers, Hindu army soldiers, were nationally motivated, and whenever Muslim leadership used to reach out to Muslim army officers, they were quite lukewarm, not knowing what's going to be the fate of Muslim League, whether Pakistan will come into being or not. Therefore, there was no alliance having been forged between the army and army officers and army rank and file and Muslim League itself. So what I concluded was that army officer corps was not nationally motivated when Pakistan came into being. So that was the reason Akunlak had the gumption to come to Lahore, meeting Qaid-e-Azam and threatening him that, well, if you'll insist upon sending that army contingent to Kashmir, we will withdraw our officers, and 500 officers, British officers who were serving in Pakistan Army, because Pakistan Army was short of officers. So and then when there are some statements whereby when Jinnah Sahib visited East Bengal, Ayub Khan did not extend proper courtesy or proper accoutrement, or proper formal protocol that was due for Governor General, because he thought that, well, he may be thinking that he do as a bloody civilian. So in the light of all this, all these historical facts, what do you think the relationship between the army officer corps and the civilian leadership, and particularly political leadership, which had been looked down upon right from the word go by the army officers?
That's a good question. I think that there is a certain degree of nuances a little bit. I mean, there are studies that looked at partition violence and related it to demob soldiers. And so we do know that Muslim soldiers coming back were what you call motivated by some understanding of nationalism, because it motivated them to get involved in conflict with non-Muslims. So this was also the other way around. So we know that there was some degree of influence. I think the question is that the lack of direction, the lack of what you call of clarity, political clarity in terms of agenda, I think that creates a situation where people decide that the military bureaucratic oligarchy thinks that it can do a better job of making a Pakistani state and making a Pakistani state in its own name in the way it fashions. And I think this comes back to the question which I kind of alluded to earlier, that about what was the kind of motivation that led to Pakistan nationalism. The point is, from 37 to 47, within 10 years, organization in 37, which was nearly defunct, to come to power in 10 years is hardly any time to build a cohesive, programmatic, well thought out program that you can say that we have looked at all different kinds of questions, whether it's constitutional, whether it's in terms of federalism, whether it's in terms of party organization. The time period is very small, and the strategy was, when you think about that, was simply, well, are you with us or not? Using contemporary parlance, we would say it's a form of populism. It's a form of populism that we are the good guys, they're the bad guys, you're with us, you're against us, we will solve everything once we achieve our goal. And I think that's part of the issue that we come. That when we come for what you call come to the 50s, what we begin to see is that there is an impatience, by the bureaucracy about the way things have developed. They are now pushing their own particular agenda, and one of the solutions that what you call they are concluding is that if we are going to form a if we want to have a strong centralized state that we want to, we need to take decisive decisions, and the decisive decision that they were pushing for, that we should form an alliance with the United States. That's why Nazriati became a liability, because he was lukewarm on this idea. He was lukewarm on a strong center. He was lukewarm on everything that the military bureaucratic oligarchy wanted. And so they said, this man has to go. And so there is that dimension.
So, Raja, can you just very briefly answer, what are the, can you hear me please? Yes. Yeah. What are the main
माइक दूसरा ले लें क्या
yes,
सर ये दूसरा माइक ले लें वो चल रहा है
yes, hello. During 1950s, what is the most significant point where the balance tended to tilt? From where there was an optimism that Pakistan can do better, but all of a sudden this coercive and authoritarian tendencies got better of the egalitarian and democratic proclivities. Can you just reflect on that?
Thank you, sir. I think some of the key factors is engagement with the legal structures and sort of laying down the foundations of the early constitutions. But of course, and I'll look at it from an archival angle as well, it's a source which is open to significant interpretations. If fallen into the wrong hands, they can pretty much manipulate the meanings as well. So throughout the 1950s, you have a series of very demanding acts being passed, from this early origins of the one unit scheme to maybe the Prada Act as well, and then on the other hand you have slightly malleable ones such as the objective resolutions, as Dr. Adnan pointed out. So you have this engagement with the legal structure that how do we set our own framework, how do we get rid of the colonial burdens on us by drafting our own decisions. But of course, it's not just about the parliamentary, or I would say the so-called democratic voices, it's also the voices of authoritarianism that are being brought in and who are sort of adjusting this framework according to their own terms and conditions. So I guess, yes, the legal technicality framework, the pedagogy of it, but also how it's being implemented or how people are sort of suiting it to their particular needs. So it's the legal activism for sure. Secondly, you do have that binary element which was at its peak during partition about, Hindu versus Muslim, these binaries that were being politicized, but you have that binarization sort of shifting to cultural identities as well. So it's how those binaries are being reconfigured. For me, that would be a very significant point, not at the same extent, but also shifting its mode as well. And secondly, sort of engagement with the legal structure where you have something flexible and it's supposed to ensure order, and yet everyone is sort of manipulating it according to their own convenience. So this I would say the location of the struggle would for me be a very key tilt point. Thank you.
Adnan, I just read it somewhere, probably that's in a book of Ian Talbot that he did on Pakistan relationship with England, particularly with reference to his British High Commission. That book was published by Routledge, in which he if I remember it correctly, he refers to 4 or 5 people, which were adamant that Pakistan should throw all its eggs in American basket. One was Sikandar Mirza, Malik Ghulam Muhammad, Chaudhry Zulfullah Khan, and Sayyid Amjad Ali. And Ayub Khan, of course. So do you think if political, this decision was given over to politicians, the option would have been different, or that was a foregone conclusion that we cannot exist without American support. And second thing that is very important for all of us to deliberate on is that it was not America who was interested in Pakistan. It was Pakistani elite that was really interested and really keen to sit in the lap of America. So, आपका क्या इसमें विचार है?
जी सर, इसमें इस तरह से है कि आपने सवाल किया है कि पॉलिटिशियंस के पास अगर फैसला करने का इख्तियार दिया जाता तो वो क्या फैसला करते हैं। इस सवाल के अंदर एक और सवाल होना चाहिए कि पॉलिटिशियन कौन से पॉलिटिशियन, फ्रॉम द वेस्ट पाकिस्तान और फ्रॉम द बंगाल। क्योंकि अगर बंगाली पॉलिटिशियंस 1950s में पाकिस्तान की जो कौमी सियासत है उसमें डोमिनेट कर जाते और अगर उन्हें गवर्नमेंट मेकिंग के अंदर या कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन मेकिंग के अंदर प्रोमिनेंट और ड्यू रोल दिया जाता तो फिर शायद पाकिस्तान का वेस्टर्न कैंप में जाना, अमेरिकन कैंप में जाना बहुत मुश्किल हो जाता। मैं ये तो नहीं कह सकता कि फिर वो बिल्कुल ना जाता, लेकिन बहरहाल बहुत ज़्यादा मुश्किल हो जाता, क्योंकि बंगाली पॉलिटिशियन ख्वाजा नाज़मुद्दीन सोहरावर्दी ये लोग अमेरिकन कैंप में जाने के बारे में वो नुक्ता नज़र नहीं रखते थे जो पंजाबी पॉलिटिशियंस रखते थे। तो पहला सवाल तो ये हो गया। दूसरा सवाल जो आपने कि दूसरा सवाल आपने क्या किया कि अमेरिकन जो हैं वो इसमें सर इस तरह से है कि ठीक है, ये बात की जाती है कि अमेरिकन अर्ली 50s में इतने ज़्यादा इंटरेस्टेड नहीं थे पाकिस्तान को अपने कैंप के अंदर लेके आने के लिए। हाँ, लेकिन कोरियन वॉर के बाद तो सिचुएशन चेंज हो जाती है ना। मेरा ख्याल है ये एक म्यूचुअल रिलेशनशिप था। अमेरिकन भी बाद में आपको इंटरेस्टेड नज़र आते हैं और पाकिस्तान की, वेस्ट पाकिस्तान की जो डोमिनेंट इस्टेब्लिशमेंट है वो तो बहुत नुमाया तौर पे अपनी प्रोक्टिविटी शो कर देती है कि हमको वेस्टर्न कैंप का हिस्सा बनना है।
That was a very fruitful discussion, and now one thing that I've been talking to my students, and there were new nuances that are being thrown for our reflection, is that whether Pakistan is independent, Pakistan is free, or Pakistan is independent but not free, or what's the difference between independence and freedom. So lots of youngsters are of the opinion that, Pakistan is independent, but it's not free. So there's the last thing that I want Yunas to have his opinion shared with us.
suppose the question is free from whom, or freedom for whom? And I think that in one sense, most Pakistani, I don't think we are that independent, and I don't think we are that free. I think the whole question about the national project isn't that it's a theoretical project, that we have some model that we want to fit in our ideology. It needs to translate into a reality that people say that it's worthwhile belonging to this kind of political entity, and that we are recipients, and that we are citizens, and that we can engage with it, and that we can influence it, and that we can have a say in it. If you don't do that, otherwise people say, we will go somewhere else. And that's exactly what happened with East Pakistan. We didn't want to talk to them. We didn't want to listen to them. We didn't want to accommodate with them. They said goodbye. And so now I think we should learn the lesson. What we still insist is no. We want to do the same thing that we did there. We don't want to change. So we need to think about a more inclusive.
Well, the inclusion and plurality, these are the messages, and these are the lessons that we must learn. And earlier we learn, the better. So with this, now I open the house. It's up to you people to join in and enlighten us with your opinions, questions, and comments. Tariq Rahman sir.
I have two issues really. One is of purely defining things. When we talk of colonialism and neocolonialism, we are actually talking about the way power functions for only 250 years, if we are talking about British colonialism in India. Power has always been functioning like this since, Vedic times. A larger expansion of these words, this terminology would be qualifying it with the way power functions. Either you conquer somebody, suppress people, or you co-opt them, etc. But it has been happening in Mughal times also. Marrying Rajput princesses was part of it. It's happening now also. It's happening right now also. So exactly. So एक तो ये था. Secondly, हम बहुत कहते हैं कि जी वो पाकिस्तान ने ये किया वो किया और अमेरिकन कैंप ज्वाइन कर लिया. भाई the question is, from the elite point of view, at that time they wanted a good army and an air force, and America gave them those things. So from their point of view, bargain theek tha. Okay, and at the same time, after 65, they didn't want to give you weapons and ammunition, etc. So what happened? Pakistan reached out to China. They took T-59 tanks from there. Exactly वही किया जो यानी किसी के lackey नहीं है. हमारा normal narrative ये है ना कि we are the lackeys of the United States, etc. That's not true. The United States wanted to use Pakistan. Pakistan wanted to use the United States. Both succeeded one way or the other. कभी ये succeed, दोनों ने किया. Okay, both failed also. Right? They reached out to China. Fine. America then begged Yahya Khan or requested Yahya Khan कि हमारी दोस्ती करा दो, और Yahya Khan ने करवा दी. उसके बाद में इन्होंने न्यूक्लियर बॉम्ब बनाना था, बना लिया. कोई अमेरिका रोक नहीं पाया. वो दैट मच इंडिया ने भी बना लिया, इन्होंने भी बना लिया. So really, it's not a question of this state being a lackey of that. मैं किसी loyalty वगैरह में nationalism में नहीं कह रहा हूँ. मैं सिर्फ कह रहा हूँ putting facts right from the point of view of the ruling elite. They have got their strategies have not been wrong. हमारे normal तरीका ये है कि बड़ी गलत थी, lackeys थे, slaves थे, etc. That I think needs to be corrected. Elite थे, yes. गलत था, okay, fine. Bengalis को किया suppress, बिल्कुल. वो बातें आप कहें, बिल्कुल ठीक. लेकिन ये lackeys वगैरह का word जो है, ये terms नहीं आप नहीं कह रहे. ये आम तौर पे इस्तेमाल होता है. I think ये misleading. Thank you very much.
Anyone else we can? Yes, please. We can have 2 questions and then.
जी अस्सलाम वालेकुम माय नेम इज़ जुबैद और मैं पॉलिटिकल साइंस का स्टूडेंट हूँ। तो मेरा डॉक्टर ताहिर कामरान साहब से ये सवाल है कि जब हमें बचपन से पाकिस्तान स्टडीज़ और हिस्ट्री वो बिल्कुल गलत पढ़ाई जाती है, तो कैसे हम अपनी हिस्ट्री के साथ कॉनाइंस करेंगे और कैसे हम जो एक सही जो रियल चीज़ है वो पढ़ेंगे। और उसके साथ हम ये अक्सर ये कह रहे हैं, जिस तरह आपने कहा कि कॉलोनियल लेगेसी जो है रियली इम्पीडिंग इन द वे ऑफ प्रोग्रेस ऑफ पाकिस्तान। तो जो आप हिस्टोरियन हैं या जो आप इंटेलिजेंसिया है, मेरा आपसे ये कंप्लेंट भी है कि हम अक्सर ये कहते हैं कि हमने हिस्ट्री से कुछ नहीं सीखा। तो जब हमें हिस्ट्री गलत पढ़ाई जाती है तो हम सीखें कैसे? दूसरा, हमारा जो पॉलिटिकल कल्चर है वो इवॉल्व नहीं हो सका। तो मेरे ख्याल में जब तक हमें पढ़ाया ही गलत जा रहा है तो पॉलिटिकल कल्चर इवॉल्व कैसे होगा और पॉलिटिकल सेटिंग्स जो हैं वो एडजस्ट कैसे होंगी? सर थैंक यू।
This might not be as such directly relevant, but I'm interested in the question of culture. Dr. Tahir started the discussion that whether it was sufficiently imagined or insufficiently imagined or not. I want to know that when we talk about Pakistan, तो जो मुस्लिम अशराफ है उसके लिए तो पाकिस्तान उसका तहजीबी और कल्चरल मसला सॉल्व करने के लिए बन रहा है। तो वो कौन से डाइवर्स या मल्टीपल पब्लिक स्पेस हैं जहाँ पे कल्चर की डिबेट हो रही है, जहाँ पे कल्चरल डिबेट्स हो रही हैं, अगर हैं तो? और क्योंकि इसकी एक पैरल एग्जांपल है 80s के अंदर लखनऊ और मॉफ व्हेन दे आर राइटिंग अबाउट द क्राइसिस ऑफ लेफ्ट, दे आर सेइंग दैट यू नीड टू टेक इनटू अकाउंट द डिफरेंट इमेजिनेशन। ऑब्वियसली उसके बाद ही जो है वो आप कोई नई बात कर सकेंगे। तो क्या अगर हम एलिटिस्ट पॉलिटिकल पब्लिक अफेयर्स को हाईलाइट करेंगे तो एट द एंड ऑफ द डे वही कुछ हुआ जो हमारे सामने आज हमें नज़र आ रहा है, या इसके अलावा भी कुछ और ऑप्शंस थी?
Tariq was talking about colonial post-colonial. I mean, yeah, okay, it is about power. But I think the difference between a colonial and a post-colonial state is the notion of citizenship, that you're not subjects. And citizenship is about a social contract and about the relationship between the individual and the state, and that there is some kind of relationship where that you have some kind of say in the way that it functions. I think that's
colonial and neocolonial.
Neocolonial, it means that I didn't use the term. I didn't use the term, but I mean I can say simply that in a neocolonial setting, it seems to suggest that your independence is compromised, and that you cannot necessarily do the things that you want to do. And there are examples in the recent past, like we suddenly decided to open relations with Russia, and the United States suddenly put its foot down, and we had to pull back. So that's an example about how we are compromised. The relationship it is a pragmatic what you call transactional relationship between elites and external powers, and Pakistan clearly, a section of the Pakistani elite saw their future in alignment with the United States. But you have to ask the question that if there was a different political order, if the democratic process was allowed to function and you had, say, politicians from Bengal having a greater say, then this may not have been the kind of political strategy they followed. So it's a question about what you call about a certain group of elites asserting their agenda and preventing others from what you call having a say. Somebody was talking about history, what's taught in school. Actually, that's not history. Pakistan study is not history. Pakistan study is ideology, and I think you need to understand the difference between ideology and an academic discipline. And in some sense, it's like standing on a hill, looking down and saying, oh, this is the road that we became. The point is, you need to stand at the bottom of the hill and look up, and then you see that there are multiple ways. You don't know at that time what route, what result might take place. And I think you need to have that kind of skepticism, that kind of critical thinking. There isn't a straight line from the past to today. It's a much more complicated kind of process. And so we say that in some sense, you know, we do have what you call a certain degree of continuity of authoritarian theme, but even that is changing. What happened in the 50s and what happens today is not the same. The relationship between the establishment, the bureaucracy, and these power centers is now much more complicated. And I think we need to recognize that, you know, no matter how hard somebody tries, social change just takes place. What you have to do is you have to recognize the opportunity. I mean, people talk about culture, and part of our problem is that we don't recognize certain cultural heritages and we prioritize other cultural heritages. Culture, I mean, there is an agency. You know, if we don't say we want to speak Punjabi, if we don't say we want to speak Balochi or Sindhi, then we're not going to do it. But there is what they call an institutional framework which these kinds of cultures flourish in. And so an institutional framework means that they need to have recognition. They need to have recognition, and recognition isn't simply, yeah, we recognize you can speak Punjabi. No, it needs to give you a job. It needs to give you some access to power. It gives you some access to education. So if you look at a parallel example, look at the Indian Federation. 2 national languages, Hindi and English, and every state language. Where a state is recognized, it has its own language. So the local state uses the local language. Education is taught in the local language. Now what does that do to culture? But it gives an institutional framework for local culture to flourish side by side with national culture. Now that's a political problem. That is a political problem, but you need to have agency. Unless you demand to speak a certain language, you are not going to create the kind of institutional change that allow these things to flourish.
Just give your opinion on that culture, particularly culture and history.
First of all, as being a recent graduate myself, मैं आपकी बात से बिल्कुल empathize कर सकती हूँ कि जो history पढ़ाई जा रही है, you know, it's clearly not the real truth as well. I'm not sure what level you were specifically referring to, but अगर आप single national curriculum को देखो, it is mostly through the government. Curriculum कौन set कर रहा है? How many professors do you have deciding what knowledge to teach the students? Of course, university में आके, thankfully, I'm in places where I have the flexibility कि मैं अपना course design कर सकती हूँ. But it needs to start way before कि आपको university adult life में एक existential crisis आए कि oh my God, everything I've been taught is a lie. Which is what happens to the best of us, and I guess that's what university life is about as well. Alternative sources would matter a lot on this, going to the archives directly, and I don't think it's static rahega because at one point colonial knowledge was considered the best one, and you know we had this narrative that especially within history, you have the victor's narrative that is written. Alternative sources, doing independent research, questioning glorification. So, you know, at one point again, colonial knowledge was seen as the utmost brilliant one. Now we're questioning the state knowledge as well. So it is going to evolve. It is going to practice. The practice is going to change, but it's going to be independent thinking, perhaps outside of the institutions, or consulting the sources directly. So definitely, even right now, agar aap keh rahe hain, political culture change nahi hua hua, especially in light of recent events, unfortunately. Let's see what the elections bring about, international ones as well. Labour and Conservative parties in the UK, for example, or even in the US as well, Republican and Democrats, support is dwindling. People aren't believing in the two binary solutions for the political parties, and it's because history is being told in a different way now, through the digital realm, through different perspectives which have been shadowed out as well. ایک چھوٹی سی مثال, I think census کو ہر کوئی بہت اچھا سمجھتا تھا, but then when we started studying it, we realized, census میں there's no undocumented immigrants that are being mentioned. Dalits were not there for quite some time, so it's not really authentic either. So history is going to have its own trends, but it's up to us as students as well to particularly look beyond what the curriculum has said for us. Culture specifically, I think the main problem we have is that you don't really see it from an interdisciplinary angle. So culture is politics and politics is culture, but for the longest time it was relegated to the private realm or sort of, feminine domain or something, which wasn't taken seriously in the public sphere as well. But right now we're at a time where the person is seen as the political, and everyone is seeing the connections between the political and the cultural. So you have sort of emergence or different angles being seen through it. Even partition right now, or the aftermath of partition, we were speaking about insufficiently imagined. It's because the cultural angle was completely marginalized to the center. It was seen as a political goal that, everyone's politically united, everyone left out the cultural differences, or maybe even some other, or ethnic tensions, as you said. So cultural angles definitely are quite left out. In fact, we were having a conversation that, certain movements such as the progressive writer movement, it got recognition much later. Similarly, I would say even communist angles as well, with the culture they had attached and the thinkers and the knowledge they were thinking on, it was quite relegated. So I guess right now the convergence between the two.
عدنان آئی ایم سوری, آپ کو میں آپ کی بجائے میں بات کرنا زیادہ, مجھے اپنی آواز زیادہ اچھی لگتی ہے. دیکھیں جی, دو تین چیزیں ہیں وہ, اب جب کبھی بھی میں ہسٹری کے اوپر سوچتا ہوں تو دو تین چیزیں اگر نہ ہوتی تو کتنا اچھا ہوتا ہے. پروڈا کی تو بات پہلے رجا نے کی, پھر ایبڈو کی بات بھی ہوئی, ایبڈو بھی کاش کہ نہ ہوتا. اسی طرح سے 1950 میں جو کمیونسٹ موومنٹ کے اوپر کریک ڈاؤن ہوا وہ نہ ہوتا. نیب جو ہے اس کے اوپر جو بہت بڑا ایک جو پرابلم ہوا, اور میں سمجھتا ہوں پاکستان میں جو سیکولر پالیٹکس ہے اس کو کاری ضرب لگی, وہ جب نیب کو ڈس الاؤ کیا گیا. کیونکہ اگر نیب کو الاؤ کیا جاتا اور بھٹو صاحب یہ نہ کرتے تو اس میں ایک سیکولر پالیٹکس جو ہے وہ یہاں کی ریڑھ کی ہڈی جو ہے آپ کے سماجی جو ایوولوشن ہے اس کے لیے بھی, اور آپ کے پولیٹیکل ایوولوشن کے لیے بھی وہ بہت ہی ممد و معاون ثابت ہوئی. سو اور ایک جو سب سے آخری جو بہت ہی بڑا ظلم ہوا ہے وہ کل جو بلہ چھین لیا گیا. سو یہ جو ساری چیزیں ہیں, یہ جو ان آرگینک گروتھ جو پالیٹکس میں یا پولیٹیکل ری انجینئرنگ جو ہوتی ہے, اس نے پاکستان کو بہت ہی زیادہ نقصان پہنچایا ہے. 1951 سے لے کے جب سے ایوب خان CNC بنے اس کے بعد سے لے کے 2024 تک, یہ چند ایک اگر یہ خاص طور پہ جو اس میں پیوٹل پوائنٹ ہے وہ یہ ہے کہ جو نیب کے اوپر پابندی جو ہے وہ میں سمجھتا ہوں کہ دیٹ واز اے ڈیسائسو موومنٹ when religious politics got sway, and secondly authoritarian regime got better potential to realize themselves in the corridors of power. تو یہ جو ایک نتیجہ نکلتا ہے. اور ایک دفعہ پھر یہ میں کہتا چلوں کہ پاکستانی قومیت اور ریاست کا نظریاتی بحران جو ہے یہ پڑھنے کے قابل کتاب ہے, خاص طور پہ وہ لوگ جو کہ ہسٹری اور پالیٹکس میں انٹرسٹڈ ہیں اور پاکستان کے مسائل کے بارے میں بہتر فہم و ادراک حاصل کرنا چاہتے ہیں, ان کے لیے یہ کتاب مسٹ ہے. اور میں اس کا فائدہ اٹھاتے ہوئے میں یہ بھی اعلان کر دوں کہ علی عثمان قاسمی صاحب کی کتاب آئی ہے, وہ جو لوگ اس کو پڑھیں گے وہ واقعتاً اس کو بہت ہی مفید پائیں گے. اس کا اگر انٹروڈکشن پڑھ گئے تو میرا خیال ہے ان کو انعام دینا چاہیے, کیونکہ انٹروڈکشن جو ہے وہ بڑا ڈینس لکھا ہوا ہے اور بڑا تھیوریٹیکل ہے. ان کو بہت بہت مبارکباد اس بات کے لیے. آپ لوگوں کی تشریف آوری کا بہت شکریہ, اور صبر کا بھی بہت شکریہ کہ ہم سب لوگوں کی بات آپ نے بڑے آرام سے سکون سے سنی. تھینک یو ویری مچ.